All right, we are live. How we doing, buddy?
Oh, we're doing well. It's a beautiful Friday morning.
It is. This is episode 1, and we are gonna look at peak performance in the light of the pyramid of success, and specifically John Wooden. So let's jump right in to the hook, our little focus for today, and talk about success. That's where our origin story starts with John Wooden. Before we get to him, we got to talk about success. So I'm going to give you a couple questions, and you can think of it as a menu of options. So John Wooden struggled or wrestled with the concept of success. So specifically, do you have any thoughts on athletic success in general, as a parent, a coach, or even an athlete yourself? And this is before we jump into our preconceived notions of Wooden's idea of success. What do you think about that?
I think success is something that we all deal with, and when you really take on the task of wrestling with it, it becomes a massive challenge, and there's a lot of disagreement in it. I think it is something that pushes people to do a lot of stupid things, especially in athletics. And I think perception of success is massive. We don't have that perception of success, then we lose our way really fast. Whether that's, one of my favorite ways to put it is that parents struggle with is development isn't linear. Humans develop at different rates at different times, and there's a perception out there that, well, if my kid is X good when they're 12, they should be X good when they're 15, at a steady rate of increase, and that's not how life works, much less the athletic human. So I think perception on success is really big, and how we define it is really important. And it doesn't have one success or one definition. It depends on where we are, where you are. I thought recently, actually, Giannis Antetokounmpo had a very interesting response to this that was very timely. And then actually the TNT guys, Shaq, Kenny, and Charles had a really good conversation around this, and they both made great points. Charles agreed completely with Giannis and thought it was refreshing to hear. And Shaq came out a little bit different, but I loved how he put it, because he's part of a military background. And so for Shaq, basically success is just, did you accomplish the mission that you set out to? And if you didn't, well, then you failed. But what Shaq's point was, is our understanding of failure and how we view it has been completely obliterated. And that, because failure is so warped, success becomes roped into that and gets warped too. So I thought they were both refreshing takes from very high level athletes who have accomplished a lot, failed a lot, succeeded a lot. But when we look at success through other people's eyes, they have a tendency to move the goalposts on us quite frequently. And I think that is perhaps maybe the hardest thing that modern day high level athletes have to deal with. Success is never attainable in their world.
I would suffice to say I agree with you, and I always say it Giannis instead of Giannis. God, man, I gotta fix that. I think what you're alluding to, and correct me, is this concept of external success versus internal success. And that's one of the reasons for this podcast and these other discussions, is that as Wooden found with Webster, as it's defined in the dictionary, go dictionaries, any type of success that involves wealth, fame, power, winning in terms of the traditional concept of winning, accumulation of possessions, or power, prestige, very outside of our control. I think this is one of the funniest things is the raging debate between Kobe and Michael and LeBron, and that's out of all of their controls. It's very subjective to the person. And I don't think it's fair to compare across the board, because we want to know, okay, who got the most out of their talent. But the only person that knows that is really you. And even we don't have a full grasp of that. And I'll go to our playing. I am not tall. I am average American, 5'9", 5'10". I played basketball. You played basketball. Who's to say we didn't get the best out of our talent? just because I didn't get to the NBA doesn't mean I wasn't a quote unquote success. I don't know if that's really a fair evaluation because we're all given separate gifts and talents and skill sets. I'll agree with Tom Brady. I'm not fast either. So, but if you inch up to your abilities as close as you possibly can, what else can we ask of people and teams and whatnot? And granted, professional sports is another deal where, they're paid and, it's their job and people are held accountable to the standard of winning, at least in terms of a championship. But from a broader perspective, anything beneath that could use a very careful reconsideration.
Mm-hmm. I love that you say that you're short, because if you're short, then what does that make me? I think I'm in midget level at that point in time. But yeah, I mean, spot on in terms of the internal external thing. But success can be relative. I think it's okay. I tend to be a very black and white person, but I'm slowly going over to the gray area of life and realizing that things are not right and left, and they're not black and white all the time. There's actually a lot of gray area. There's a lot of space in between. There's no reason that something can't be a success and a failure at the same time. And look, the only difference between failure and success is learning, right? You're going to fail. Really, the failure happens if you don't learn. If you don't learn, then you're going to fail again. The more you learn, though, your failures become successes. So it's a very small gap between the two.
Very much so. I always wonder how many coaches we don't know about because they don't have accolades. Like phenomenal coaches out there that are getting the most out of their kids. You think of, I'm in a small town, but you're in a small town USA and you get who you get, right? Who's to say that an 8-8 season isn't the absolute pinnacle of success for that group? I can think we can name off how many movies have we seen. And some of them are, dramatized so that they win the thing. But at the same time, it's like, no, that's the ceiling. And that was success. So I'm going to transition with you. So we'll talk about how did Wooden come across his definition of success. So I have some notes. I'll get your reaction to it. Let's go to his time. Now, if you don't know, John Wooden is regularly ranked as the top or best coach of all time. And he was very famous at UCLA, won 10 national championships in 12 years, and had an unbelievable, 88 game winning streak, a winning percentage that was through the roof. And he was iconic through those then Louis Alcindor, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton days, but he did win championships before that. So we're thinking the 60s and 70s for anybody that's new to this. He has since passed away, lived a very long life. What outlasted him was his pyramid of success, and we'll go to the origins of that. So in 10th grade, he was in a class. His teacher asked him to write a paper on what is success. And they all agreed that success was not those mementos or mentions, scores, trophies, medals. So they didn't equate status with success. And Wooden was inspired by his father. And another time, we'll have to come back to the question about everybody wants to be John Wooden, but no one wants to be Joshua Wooden. But his dad had two things that he tried very hard to impart upon his sons. John had more than one brother. He said, number one, don't try to be better than anybody else. And number two, never stop or always try to be the best you can be. And this brings back that internal versus external locus of control. So as a coach or a parent, have you seen this play out? How have you seen that play out? I would wager that a majority of kids, even parents, are trying to be better than somebody else the majority of the time. How do you react to Joshua Wooden and what he was trying to teach?
Yeah, so much of where we look at where our children is at relative to the people around us. And I think that's unfair to our kid, right? And especially when it comes to sports, because oftentimes we're putting them in a new environment. I mean, just think of us as adults. If, you're in one industry and you go into the art industry and you've never been in there before, Would you expect to be one of the best artists in the room? Well, no, right? So we have to really understand that part of it, right? That it's relative to skill and ability, just God-given, boom. And then again, development is not necessarily relative to those around us. Some pick it up really fast, some pick it up really slow. There's a reason why we have what's called an average, right? So I think it's important to understand kind of the space that you're entering and having expectations accordingly, right? And I think a lot of times too is we as parents compare it to our human experience. Well, we were different humans. We had different abilities. We had different levels of athleticism, and so we'll have that in our mind and expecting that for our kid, right? So if we just jumped in and picked things up really fast, and that's just the type of person we are, that's not necessarily going to translate to our kid. But we fell in love with our own experience so much that that's the expectation that we have of their experience. And so if they're not fitting in how we did relative to the kids around us, that's when we start looking for external factors to blame the lack of success on. And that's when we really get ourselves into a myriad of issues and culture problems and all sorts of nastiness. So making sure that focus on your child and not necessarily on the rest of them, because they're all in different places, and that's perfectly acceptable and okay. And that's not where they're going to end up. So patience is so key.
Well, playing the long game. And I love that you mentioned the comparing your experience to your athlete's experience, even a coach, right? Because we're all so different in terms of our expectations that we bring to the table, of what we are looking for in our experience and how we react, even the most subtle personality differences of being highly competitive versus not. And we project those onto them is an unfair burden. It is not your kids or your athlete's job to weight your expectations on top. It's good to hold them to high expectations. At the same time, bringing it from the ground up. And I couldn't agree with that. I see comparison all the time because I think we want to obviously play. Everybody wants to play. Your point though about people being in different spots, I know as my kids start sports, some kids have been playing a long time. They're coach's kid. I was a coach's kid. I was light years ahead of some people because I played. But if you're starting from ground zero, that is not a fair comparison at any juncture. So I agree with that. And that's something that I am thankful wouldn't got at the beginning. And
well, hey, let's think about this at a bigger level too. Think about LeBron and Jordan, right? Since LeBron was, 16, 17? The moniker is this guy going to be the guy? Is this guy going to be the guy that dethrones Jordan as the greatest of all time, right? Is he the GOAT? Is he the king? Well, he's adopted the persona of being the king. And I would be very curious, and I don't think you can ever find a scientific answer for this, but how much of that influenced him to always be chasing something else than his best? I don't think he'd ever admit it necessarily, but how much of a distraction that became in almost in a daunting task to have to I got to be better than Jordan. That's what everyone's expecting me. I got to be better than Jordan. When Michael, I think, dealt with that more from a team perspective, right? He had to be better than the Celtics, right? The Bulls had to beat the Celtics. He had to chase after Larry, but that was such a different dynamic, I feel like, especially without social media. And Michael wasn't covered when he was 17, right? Like, he didn't have a media circus around him. So Mike was always just chasing his best. He wanted to be Michael Jordan. And I feel like LeBron James has wanted to be Michael Jordan in a lot of ways. I think he's chilled out a little bit as he's gotten older, but I think especially early on in his formative years, that had to have a massive impact on him and how he handled his career, especially that early failure stuff.
Two additions to that. So tell me what you think of this, because as you're talking, it propped up is it seems like there's been an evolution. So let's take those two figures and add one more of that team perspective to more of an individual perspective. So we take Michael. He, yes, became Michael Jordan, but he still deferred to the team. Right? They won championships. Then we saw this evolution with another individual, Kobe, who wanted to be like Jordan, but he seemed to adopt his own thing, right? He became, Black Mamba, but he still had that little bit of ego with getting rid of Shaq and wanting to win on his own. But Kobe was the guy surrounded by guys. So he had a little bit of that semblance of the team, whereas LeBron seems to be making decisions from Cleveland to Miami, back to Cleveland to Los Angeles, which is, like you said, the shadow of Jordan. And this is my second point on that. I don't know if he can ever shake that. Will he ever be truly fulfilled with his career? No matter what he does. I don't think so. Like the shadow, the cast that's been over him, unless he does, he may have his own peace of mind. Good for him. Great. But from a legacy perspective that Kevin Durant seems to have given up on finally, I don't know if he'll ever get beyond that. And it's going to annoy him or eat him to shreds in his retirement years, unless I'm wrong. And I hope I'm wrong. But I agree with you that is something that I don't know if he can get around.
Well, that's a good point. Like if you would have gone back to the beginning of his career and asked, okay, we're chasing Jordan here. We want you to be the next Michael Jordan. We want you to be better than Michael Jordan. We want you to be the GOAT. What does that look like? 15 years from now, what does that look like? 20 years from now, what does that look like? Does that mean you have the all-time point scoring record? Because you did it. Does that mean that you have to win at least 6 championships? Okay, you failed there. You got to more. Does that mean that you go undefeated in the finals? Was that part of the bit? Because that's a big argument. You're talking to a guy here who thinks Jordan is the best because solely the point of the game is to win. You play to win the game. Okay. I can't think of a better person. I know people talk about Bill Russell, but in the modern era, and I think Tom Brady's entered this discussion, sort of. Football is a whole different ball game, different animal. Mm-hmm. But if the point is to win a basketball game 5-on-5, I don't think there's any other human that just had the capability to will him and 5 other guys across the finish line to win a ball game. And I think that's why Jordan's the greatest. I would simplify it there. Forget all the stats. I just need to win a basketball game. Who's the guy who's going to help my team the most do that? I think it's Jordan.
Yeah. I think this is a good point to finish off Wooden's definition. So what did he define success as? Okay, so two things and then his definition, and I'll read them quick. So he was also inspired on top of his dad's 2 notions, which I think LeBron violates for the record, at his own detriment and maybe at society's, is a short poem. So the first one said, "At God's footstool to confess, a poor soul knelt and bowed his head. I failed," he cried. The master said, "Thou didst thy best. That is success." The second poem was by George Moriarty, and he was a former MLB ump of all things. And he wrote this very interesting poem, very poignant as well, on what he called the road ahead or the road behind. And feel free to give me any feedback on what you think. I'll read it quickly, but just to give you a gist. So, "The Road Ahead or the Road Behind" by George Joseph Moriarty. And I quote, he said, "Sometimes I think the fates must grin as we denounce and insist the only reason we can't win is the fates themselves have missed. Yet there lives on the ancient claim, we win or lose within ourselves. The shining trophies on our shelves can never win tomorrow's game. You and I know deeper down there's always a chance to win the crown. But when we fail to give our best, we simply haven't met the test of giving all and saving none until the game is really won, of showing what is meant by grit, of fighting on when others quit, of playing through, not letting up. It's bearing down that wins the cup, of taking it and taking more until we gain the winning score, of dreaming there's a goal ahead, of hoping when our hopes are dead, of praying when our hopes have fled, yet losing, not afraid to fall, if bravely we have given all. For who can ask more of a man than giving all within his span? Giving all, it seems to me, is not so far from victory. And so the fates are seldom wrong, no matter how they twist or wind. It is you and I who make our fates. We open up or close the gates on the road ahead or the road behind. To finish, Wooden then defined success famously as peace of mind that is the direct result of the self-satisfaction in knowing you did your best to become the best which you are capable of becoming. That is a mouthful. So that is the secrets, is that you're really the only one who knows and can have that peace of mind at the other side of the rainbow. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, especially that last one. Two things stood out to me. The first poem, it starts with humility. And I think we will think of, I know Kobe and Michael, right? I know them probably the best. And I know Kobe was notorious, and you just hear more stories coming out after his death about the dude was the first one in the gym. He was the last one to leave. He was out working everybody. You don't do that unless you have a humble mindset, because you realize nothing has been given to you. You realize that you are not all that bag of chips unless you work for it. So I see that fully in him. Michael has the notorious, he was cut from the middle school basketball team, or high school basketball team, which is a humbling experience. But Michael was notorious for the same thing, like just worked his tail off. There is that humility factor that comes through all of the best athletes, and so many times in kids, and I think it's getting worse. And I think it has to stem from the parents. I don't think kids just naturally tend to do this, but there is a real lack of work ethic, and maybe it's because they're spread too thin. Maybe it's not a lack of work ethic. It's just they're spread so thin, doing so many things that just don't have the capacity to give their best in any three things that they're doing, because they're doing 17. Certainly could be a thing. But humility stuck out to me in the first one as kind of the launching point to human success. And then that poem, I would have to read it, but it almost started out as like, there's so much out of my control. And then it seemed to finish as, but I do have things in my control. I do have the ability to open gates and close gates if I need to, if I want them. So the first half stuck out to me is there are so many things out of our control. And then the second half stuck out to me that, yes, but we do have things in our control. And we really have to own those things and give our very best effort at the things that we can control. And the rest will fall where it's going to fall, and it's going to be the best for us. Right. This is kind of what I go through people when people are like, "Oh, what's your 5 to 10 year vision, Jake? Where do you plan on being in 5 to 10 years?" I don't know. What kind of cheesy answer do you want me to give? You want me to be like, "Oh, I want to be as rich as Bill Gates," or I want to be as successful as Michael Jordan? Like, no. I want to be the best I can be every day. And I trust that if I'm going to put forth my best effort and my best attitude and control the things I can control every day for the next 5 years, wherever I'm in 5 years, I'm going to be happy with it, because I couldn't have done any better. That's where and I shouldn't say I couldn't have done any better. I probably could have done better. I could have made a better decision. I could have made a better investment along the way. But that at that time was what I thought was best, and I have to live with that.
Yep. Well, it's the concept of poker, for example, is you play the cards you've been dealt, and you play that hand. And at that time, that was the best decision, because when you play poker, you read your hand, you read the cards on the table, and you make the best decision. And sometimes you're right. Even with a bad hand, you can still win. But same thing is, you have a great hand and still lose and make every correct decision. And you got to kind of let go of the outcome a little bit and say, that's what Kobe and even others, you put in the time, you put in the thing, and you got to let go on the back end. Yes, you react and get better and have that humility, but at the same time, you only can get so far. Like when I do A and B and C, I still can't get it to 100%. I think that's why we're enticed by athletics of all things, is that we don't know. We like the unpredictability that anything might happen. Everybody starts 0-0. That's why I like the playoffs. Everybody's 0-0 again. That's why we have an 8 seed beat a 1 seed, a 16 seed beat a 1 seed. You don't know on a given day. And that's the beauty of sports. And that's a great place to move towards, how do we get to this pyramid? Okay, so Wooden had success. That's his definition. He's like, well, how in the world do I teach this? Right? And he was an English teacher before he was a coach. He coached as well. And he was frustrated that parents would say, oh, well, other kids can get C's, but my kid can't get a C. So, if they're putting in their time. So he was frustrated that he couldn't reach this pyramid or this pinnacle that he had as success at the top. So he was inspired by his high school coach named Glenn Curtis and this ladder of achievement. And he wanted to know, how do you achieve this success? How can I teach? He was an impeccable teacher. He would call himself a teacher if you made him pick. How do I teach people to get there? So over 14 years, that's a long time, by the way. 14 years, he developed the pyramid of success that we now know today, which he considered the personal values that were necessary to achieve success. And there ended up being 25 individual blocks. That's a lot as well. And the whole reason was to achieve that peace of mind. If you exhibit these character traits, personal values at the top, you can then reach that pinnacle of success. And I love that he built this roadmap, because it's such a sliding scale. And we'll get to that towards the end here when we can evaluate how we currently stand with this pyramid. But backing up real quick. So on John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, it's readily available on any search, and I have it in front of me, and as do you. We have this pyramid, and what you'll see is there are several tiers, and then there's this mortar going up and down the side. So there's 5 traits at the bottom, then 4, 3, 2, 1, and then at the very, very top is success. So I think to aid people without pulling up the actual pyramid, let's walk through each tier together. I'll read them. You give me what you think stands out to you. No specifics necessarily needed. Just kind of let's get a general overview of, okay, what were these traits and how are we going to interact with them? So on the bottom, we have 5 traits. So the 2 that he considered the cornerstones were industriousness and enthusiasm, meaning there is no substitute for hard work with industriousness. And enthusiasm means that emotional contagion. You must truly love what you're doing, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. In the middle is friendship, loyalty, and cooperation. So friendship comes from mutual esteem, respect, and devotion, especially when you're between the lines. Loyalty is to yourself and all those who are upon you. Keep your self-respect. And then cooperation is with all levels of your coworkers. Listen to be heard. That's a big one to unpack. Be interested in finding the best way, not having your own way. So any thoughts on the 2 cornerstones or the foundation of Wooden's pyramid?
The 2 cornerstones are great. I often tell people, really, the key to development is we tend to get a lot of people with a lot of letters behind their name coming in and being, oh, this is the best way to develop such and such, and this is the best way to develop such and such, and making it an extreme science. And just to simplify it, if you love something and you repeat it enough, you're going to get good at it. If you love something enough and you research enough, you're going to be intelligent about it. So to really simplify development, I think it's those 2 cornerstones in a nutshell. Do you love it and do you repeat it? If you do those 2 things, then you're going to grow and develop in something. For me, the middle 3, the thing that stands out is loyalty. So Patrick Lencioni came out with a book that is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and his base to building a functional team would be trust. You have to trust each other. If you don't trust each other, and I think this goes right hand in hand with loyalty, your team will fall apart. So if you aren't a loyal member of that team, of any team that you're a part of, it's going to prohibit you from being successful. Not only the team being successful, but you being successful within that team, because your teammates don't trust you, and that can lead to a lot of of negative experiences in growth, slowing of growth. And I think the other two go pretty hand in hand with that, right? I think the key to take away from there is you can't do it by yourself. You can work hard and you can love something, but it takes a team, whether it's a coach, whether it's teammates, whether it's a parent, a brother that kicked your butt when you were playing in the backyard, like whatever. You can't do anything in this life by yourself. And I think he encapsulates that really well in those two.
Yeah, I can't wait to dig into each of these blocks as we go forward, because that loyalty, I don't want to play a semantics game with you in terms of where loyalty begins and trust ends. It's all there, but we'll get to that. I agree. I mean, we'll deconstruct these more. I'll keep it pretty short, but like individually, you do need the work ethic and the joy. And I know as we go into industriousness, I just imagine any of those Tough Mudder people with their mud all over their faces, they're bloody, beaten, bruised, and they're still smiling. It's like, how can you have fun doing that? But it turns out that there is a lot of joy in a good, hard day's work and enjoying that with somebody, like you accomplished something. And we know that that's the case in a number of ways. The more you put into something, the more joy you get out of it, even when it's hard.
Well, there's a difference. There's a difference between fun and joy, though. And that's key to understanding.
We will get to that. And so let's go to the second tier for time's sake. We're just going to overview. We'll dig in each of these much more in depth. Like, what are those like nested dolls? What are those things called?
Russian dolls?
Yeah,
Russian
those
dolls.
We'll get to those. So each of these will be one of those. All right. So the next level up has 4 traits: self-control, alertness, initiative, and intentness. And self-control is practicing self-discipline and keeping your emotions under control. Alertness is being observing constantly, staying open-minded, being eager to learn and improve. Initiative is cultivating the ability to make decisions and thinking alone. Do not be afraid of failure, but learn from it. And intentness is setting a realistic goal, concentrating on its achievement by resisting all temptations and being determined and persistent. That's a lot. Second tier, or the tier of 4.
Yeah, again, such good stuff. I think this really boils down to the heart of a person. And I would say self-control might be the hardest thing of personal development. I think that is probably the most elusive thing to people, to really have the self-control, in Kobe's case, to get up at 4 a.m. and go to the gym and stay there and keep shooting and keep working on your footwork and things like that. So for me on that role, I'm picking self-control as maybe the hardest thing for people to really grasp. I think a lot of people might even say they have self-control. I know for me, that's one of the biggest things, right? Of really being dedicated to something, diet, sleep, just little things in life, right? That take a lot of self-control to set up a good routine for yourself, to set up a healthy lifestyle for yourself. So that's the one that sticks out to me. I'm excited to unpack alertness, because it's to me, that's kind of a strange one. I think a lot of these things people would read and be like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. I don't know that alertness would really pop up on anyone else's radar. So that might be the one that I'm most excited to unpack as we continue on.
Our Russian nesting dolls. The self-control, Wooden was a stoic. He's inspired by older books as well, Shakespeare and whatnot, but he was a big fan of keeping your emotions in check. His teams were called robotic, even, in terms of their ability to just stay even keel, not getting too high or too low. And I'm going to give away one of the secrets of that. The reason why he not only succeeded is he had this map, but he was also able to model these. I mean, he was not inauthentic. He had these under his own control. I agree with the self-control as well. We'll go to the third tier as we keep moving, which was condition. So we have condition, which is mental. This is a different one. So we had mental condition, moral condition. That'll throw us for a few people for a loop. That's a buzzword. And physical condition. So the mental and physical, that seems pretty buzzworthy these days, and training your brain and training your body. Okay, we got that. Moral is one I'm excited about. But the second one there is skill. You need to have the fundamentals down and be able to do them quickly, is what he said. Knowledge of the fundamentals to be able to execute them without thinking. Team spirit, a genuine consideration for others. And the word that we have transitioned here, he took out a willingness to sacrifice personal interest for others to an eagerness to sacrifice for the glory and welfare of all. So he said people can be willing but not eager, and he wanted athletes who are eager. I know there was a bunch and a fly over, but what do you think about the third tier?
Yeah, the condition thing, so much to unpack there. I love that diet's in there. I feel like that was kind of ahead of his time in a lot of ways. It's a fairly recent development of how much diet impacts the athlete. Because I think even in the 60s and 70s, athletes were pounding the booze. I mean, I guess they kind of still are today. I think like Marshawn Lynch taking a shot of Hennessy before games. But anyways, certainly that feels ahead of his time.
Wouldn't do Hennessy before games?
You know, maybe that would be a very interesting story that I would love to hear. But yeah, and then I wonder how much time he put into thinking how all of these things align, because I find it really interesting that skill. You look at this two ways, right? It's in the middle, kind of keeping everything together, but it's also buried in the middle.
Yeah.
Like
it's a lot higher than I thought it would be if you made me pick.
Yeah.
I get.
Yeah,
I figured a bit on the second tier, but maybe we'll have to do a rearranger here. Do you have anything else to add on the third tier? Or do you want me to go next?
No, I think you nailed the team spirit aspect when you transitioned there. So yeah.
So let's do the last three blocks. We'll do the mortar, and then we'll wrap up here. So the next two, so we went from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2. We have poise, which is just being yourself. Now, this surprised me in the definition. Being at ease in any situation, never fighting yourself. I think I've seen this a lot with athletes where just can't get out of their own stinking way. And I think this is especially hard as a kid because we have this comparison and identity to others. And I'm obviously going off the rails before giving you the other ones, but I just had to say it's just being uncomfortable. I think this helps with coaches or parents in knowing your role. And when we get to poise, that's going to be a big deal, because I would love to look at teams across time and saying, when you can identify that shared clear goal and role, which are social flow triggers, that makes your job so much easier. Because then if there's that ambiguity of who's the alpha, who's not, everybody's fighting to be the alpha. That's why I'm not as big of a fan of super teams in that concept, because they're constantly fighting who's going to take the shot. That should not be a conversation. Yeah. Anyways, but poise, we have confidence. Respect without fear may come from being prepared and keeping all the things in perspective. So preparation. And at the top, the one is competitive greatness. This one's going to be great to get to, is being at your best when your best is required and enjoyment of a difficult challenge. So you prepared. Now it's game 7. And can you not rise to the occasion? Because we do fall to our training, but when you need a good opponent to bring out your best, a worthy opponent. And those are the moments that get built up over time to competitive greatness. So we got poise, confidence, and competitive greatness.
Yeah, I love those. Poise, I think, is really interesting when looking at modern athletes. The name that jumps off in my head is Karl Anthony Towns right now. I think LeBron James had a little bit of this as well in his younger years. Again, going back to the whole Jordan comparison that he struggled with. It's like, well, who am I, though, in all of this? So that'll be an interesting one to unpack. I love your comment on the roles there. And confidence, right? The difference between humility and confidence, how you can be humble but confident, I think is a great thing to look at as athletes. And then competitive greatness at the top. I mean, what a cap. I love that cap, right? Because it all comes down to competitiveness. If you're truly competitive, it's going to pour into all of those buckets below it, right? If you're to fill up competitive greatness with water and just keep filling it up, it's all going to pour over into those things below. So I think that is a super, super great way to cap off the pyramid. And I think it fits really well.
All right. Now we are going to wrap up because we're going to run short on time. I know you need to run like I need to run. And let's do the mortar. Let's do the most valuable idea here, and then we'll do our wrap up. And let's do rapid fire session for this, okay?
Okay.
So we have the mortar. The mortar was what keeps these pieces together, and I think these were additions along the way. So I don't know if don't quote me on this, because we are now on the 75th anniversary of Wooden's pyramid, because he completed it in 1948. So I think he added these as he went forward, but the only two that I remember were included were at the top above competitive greatness were faith and patience. I'm not going to define these, but pick one mortar piece that intrigues you or stands out to you along the way. So I'll go from the left side up and then down. So we have ambition, adaptability, resourcefulness, fight, which means determined effort, faith, patience, integrity, reliability, honesty, and sincerity.
Wow. Yeah, you could unpack all of those a lot. Adaptability, I think, is really interesting. I think that's lacking in a lot, especially youth sports. We don't want to adapt to the program that we're in or the team that we're on. If the team doesn't provide the needs that I think that my child deserves, and not that it doesn't happen, right? Where you're on a team like, yeah, that's not the right fit for my child. But I think far too often it's a fine team, but you don't like the role, or you don't like where your child has fit in with that team. And instead of teaching adaptability, instead of teaching how to fit in, how to play the role that team requires, we go off and we join a new team, right? This team isn't not the one. And so we're creating sticks in the mud, right? And a lack of adaptability on that side. On the other side of the pyramid, I think I'm going to go with honesty. Honesty is the one that probably intrigues me the most.
Why? Why that? Okay, I got you. It says in honesty in thought. That's interesting. And in action. What do you mean by interesting honesty?
I think, especially when it comes to teams, but I think even to individuals, because I think it creates a lot of, we could go down a big rabbit hole, but a lot of even physical ailments in our society that we have. The old adage, right? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. I think I get the context in which that is a phrase, but I think within a team, if there's true trust and buy-in, that statement doesn't make any sense. I think there's certainly an art to communicating with one another, right? But within a team, conflicts are going to happen all of the time. And I think too often we are taught that conflict is a bad thing. And as a result, it takes us away from being honest with people. And when we're not honest with people, we do not build trust. We do not build loyalty. We do not build cooperation or friendship. And I could probably take it through all of these, right? We don't build self-control, because you may think like, oh yeah, I'm building self-control by not saying something. But both people should have self-control enough to be able to say what's on their minds or what's going on in their hearts, and the other person to receive it, and then have self-control back to respond appropriately back, right? That's true self-control, not running and not hiding from something. That to me isn't self-control. I don't think that's what the heart of what's going on. So for me, honesty on that side is probably the most intriguing thing, and I think is one of the things that kills teams really quick. Is if they don't have honesty to deal with conflict amongst each other, then it's just a pot of ickiness and things that tear a team apart.
I can't wait to get to that, because as you said, withholding honesty is an issue. I mean, I don't know if we want to go so far as saying that's being dishonest. I don't know if we're trying to save people from the putting them down easy. And we'll get to it, but I think tripping over the truth. I think with some of our technology, or just being the eyes, we don't want to be the ones to deliver. I think it is the art of delivery as well, but being able to have people find it out for themselves is good. Well, we're going to wrap up with our most valuable idea, and then get your reaction on scoring your pyramid. So something to do, a takeaway. Our most valuable idea here is really living the questions. And the idea of, what have we learned in the 75 years since this pyramid has been made? What has come out in literature? What has come out in athletics? How has those shifts changed from Wooden's day to now? Like, what can we still learn from this pyramid that we can apply as an athlete, as a parent, and as a coach? What do we see that can help us on our pinnacle to success? So we're going to walk through each of these Russian nesting dolls one at a time and uncover what we can uncover. And that will be the goal for this particular series, is the peak performance of the pyramid of success. And I cannot wait. It's going to be fun to look at again from a whole different, I mean, we're in a completely different age than he was. And seeing if this thing even still does apply. I just can't imagine that it couldn't, but I think that I would love to see it, because we could use it more than ever. And of one. To wrap up, let's look at the whole pyramid and kind of pick your poison. I'll give you some time to think. But if you're listening, I would like you to go find a pyramid of success and take any of these options like Jake can. Okay. So I would ask you to scale or score yourself. That could be you personally as an athlete, could be your team, could be your athlete in your life. But go through each of these and go with your gut. Okay. So don't overthink this and nuance it, but give yourself a score from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 if you like a little bit bigger score system. And just notice, where are you strong? What are you good at here? Because I think there is a little bit of humility that needs to be there, and honesty, as you said. But it's okay to be honest. Like, hey, I work really stinking hard, and we all have strengths here, and that's what he's getting after. But where are you a little bit weak? It's like, man, that one just does not come natural to me for whatever reason. I should give that some attention. And my challenge to me, to Jake, and to others is try and get that 1+1 better. How could you go from a 2 to a 3, a 3 to a 4? Don't try and get to a 5. I don't think it's really realistic to be a 5 on all these. I think it's very much a sliding scale through a season, but it's getting better, a little bit better, like you said earlier in the episode, a little bit better each day. So I think that's enough wait time. So pick your poison, Jake. So any of your teams, you as an athlete, give me one that you're like, man, I got that one. Like, I'm not ashamed. I got that. No humble brag if you want to. And then one, if you could say, hey, this is one that I would love to give myself a little attention to. Maybe I didn't know that was a thing, or I wish I had that. What in here, not success, mortar or otherwise, are your 2 blocks?
So you're wanting me to rate the success on one of the blocks? This is like an inception of success. I gotta you gotta define success for me first before I
no. It's like,
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No, you're good. I understand. I get it. I'm poking the bear a little bit. Okay, so I would say loyalty is my biggest strength here. I'm most successful in loyalty, probably even to a fault, quite frankly. But that's a conversation. Yeah, right. But I have never had an issue fitting in with a team. And I guess this could go into poison, knowing yourself and fitting into a role, but I'm not quite there yet. Just loyalty would definitely be my biggest strength as I look at this. And then for me, my number one thing that I want to improve is self-control. Like getting into a routine. I'm trying to get up earlier, but man alive, it's really hard to wake up in the morning and look at the time and be like, well, I don't really have to move for another 30 minutes. I think I might just lay here for a little bit longer, right? Instead of getting up and ripping out a workout or reading a book or something more productive than laying in bed scrolling on your phone doing nothing. So for me, that is the one that I'm constantly trying to improve.
I'm going to go with, for the industriousness. I don't know if it was a youngest child syndrome, but man, I love the work of sports. The hitting until your hands bleed kind of idea, almost to a detriment too. So if we want to go to the far scale where you almost think you're entitled or you deserve confidence or greatness or success, like, oh, because I hit 100 balls, I should go 4 for 4 today. And it's a juvenile misconception, a whole nother deal. But I had no issue with the industry. I love the work. Like, the practices are fun. You can get better and, you hold yourself accountable. I would say the weakness would depend on the era, when you're younger, middle school, high school. just for comparison's sake, not for comparison, for difference's sake. So I'll go away from self-control because I really struggle with the emotions of it being a teenager. That was hard. Dealing with failure, I did not have the toolkit, especially in baseball. It is so hard to just rest in giving your best effort. I would love to have this framework. I would say probably confidence. I was a pretty awkward, I had a really ugly duckling face, and as well. I struggle with confidence, and I don't know if it was because I didn't have confidence myself, or I wasn't given a lot of that. But I was constantly, maybe it's not poised because that's close, but very self-conscious, and I couldn't get out of my own way. Maybe that was the more poised, never fighting yourself.
We're going to need to unpack this at some point because never shown confidence in. My biggest memory of this would be you getting an inbounds pass and refusing to dribble the ball up the floor, as I can only describe as a complete and utter show of lack of confidence, while your entire team is screaming at you in confidence that you can dribble the ball 30 feet.
I took poised to probably an extreme. You played a role, and that was your role, and you didn't go outside of those bounds, mostly over my own self-limiting limitations. I didn't think I could. And even despite the evidence around me to go do that. But I think a lot of kids and a lot of athletes struggle with that, in terms of saying, oh, well, especially as you develop, right? Because you're at this point in your career, but as you get better, way you see yourself is probably the way you started versus where you're at now. Sure. Like, whoa, okay, I thought I was still here, but everybody else is telling me I'm over there. And I think that is going back to your honesty, people being honest with you. Dude, suck it up, dribble. You got this. And it doesn't take that much, because you hear a good friend or somebody, a teammate that you believe, tell you can do it. You're like, oh, yeah. And then you do it once. You're like, oh, I didn't even think that was a thing.
Yeah.
Or crippling fear. To
that point, and you don't want to get into this, but I think almost the reverse happens more often, though, where you're not good enough to do something, but in your head you think you are, and no one is honest enough with you to be like, you're not ready for that, don't do that.
Okay, and we will break that down,
right, and not in a shameful way. And I think too many parents will take it as oh, you're trying to shame my child by telling him not to do that. It's well, no. If you aren't capable of shooting threes, or you shoot 10%, it's upon the coach or somebody, a teammate, to go no. If you go into the gym and show me you can make 30% of them, well, this conversation changes. Correct. But until then, honestly, that's not best for you, and it's not best for us. We're gonna stop this. But that conversation doesn't get had enough because people are afraid to hurt feelings.
Correct. Oh man, we are gonna have some fun with these Russian nesting dolls. We're gonna have to give that the title of this episode. Forget the fancy peak performance of the Pyramid of Success. We need just Russian nesting dolls.
Bruin nesting dolls, I think, was what we'll go with.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what we're going to conclude today. As we go forward, we're going to deconstruct one block at a time, one episode at a time, and see what we can see today. What it wouldn't see then, and what can we see now? Good talk, buddy. That was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
See you next time.